Welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. It's December 21st. We are going to do an update on our uranium names today. So it is during the market open, so we are going to see some live market action. Let's look at and I think we have a daily cycle low here. Now, this is the spot physical uranium trust. This is like, wow. I mean, this is kind of the textbook definition of a bear flag, right? Like consolidated low, consolidate, you expect another low here. So that's concerning to say the least. And that's the thing, the price of the equities hasn't always moved with uranium itself quite as, as much as you would expect, like with gold, for instance, or something like that. But you can see on the weekly chart, pretty vicious downtrend here. And this week is red now, but we are trying to rally a little bit. Again, you saw that little chop zone we had on the daily. This is just the weekly version. And so the premise here is we are in long-term cycle decline as per these arrows here. You can see, as I always say, look at the monthly chart. Are we red or are we green, right? If we're red, we're going lower. If we're green, we're going higher. In this case, we're obviously red. And then your next question is, and equally important, maybe even more important, are we making lower lows, higher highs, or something in between compared to the previous candle? This is our previous candle. Pretty bad looking candle. Are we making a higher high versus this candle? Obviously not. Nowhere near that. Are we making a lower low? Yes, we are. So we're making a red and making a lower low. We're in a downtrend. Not good. But there is hope, right? Let's look at the ETFs first. So this is URNM. So this is looking a little bit weak compared to some of the individual names, but that appears to be your daily cycle low. And today, again, today's Wednesday, December 21st. This looks to be day 2. What about URA? So URA made a new low yesterday. So today's your first day of a new daily cycle. And by the way, same thing for the S&P. Always important to know what's happening on the higher time frame. I do suspect we're in weekly cycle decline for the S&P 500, though at the same time, we just had a daily cycle low, so you want to watch out for a lower high here, which is actually what we're expecting here from uranium, and we'll talk about that. Well, actually, let's maybe lay that out. And if you haven't seen that video about the S&P, the broader market, definitely take a look at that. You'll find a link in the description. So this is day 1 of a new daily cycle. This is URA. So let's just stick to this one for a second, right? We can see another daily cycle low here, right? Pretty clear. So you can kind of think of this whole thing as one big arc / cycle, right? And what would our count be here? So we made a high on day 21, and we're now making a low on day 47. Doesn't mean we're going to repeat this exact same pattern every time. Here's your last one. That was 37 days. Wow, this is like a kind of triple bottom type situation here. You might call it like something like that. That gets you to 34 days. From here to there, gets you to 37 days. So you're starting to see a cycle that's somewhere around the high 30s, and sometimes it can get stretched. It can go longer and get into the 40s, right? Now, there are smaller cycles within, and that's an important point just to understand. There are always smaller cycles within. I mean, you can see there are even hourly cycles, right? So there are always going to be smaller cycles. You can see this was a cycle, and a cycle is really just from swing low to swing low, which means in between those two swing lows, there's going to be a swing high. I hope you're following that, right? So this is a swing low, that's a swing low. Where's the swing high in between them? That's right, it's this, right? So we rallied from this swing low to this swing high, and then to this swing low, which was a higher low than this, and then made a higher high. So that's good. It was in an uptrend, but then we rolled over. So you can think of this as one cycle, then this is another cycle, then this is another cycle, and this, right? But it might just be easier. Again, as the picture develops, it's just one big cycle that really gave back the whole rally. That's the important thing to understand too, right? Like we have this whole rally here, right? From the Pico bottom to this top was 18%, $3.45. And then what did we do? We gave back $2.96 of it. So we didn't give back everything, but we basically did. I mean, that's a really crummy rally or cycle, really. So we're on day 2. This was obviously a longer cycle, even though it gave back all the gains. So we'll see how many days we can rally for. But we also know that, this thing can top out relatively early. And it depends if you think about this as an early top. But we did go on to make a higher high. Let's look at CCJ, where we had actually been tracking the numbers. And right, as I talked about, you have these smaller cycles, right? So like this is 15 days, right? This thing is 15 days. And so in hindsight, we can just call this whole thing one big cycle, just like URA. I hope you're seeing that. It's very similar, right? So basically from, call it here, and then you have your high on day 9. And here we're getting our cycle low on day 46. So clearly CCJ massively underperformed the ETF because it topped out on day 9, right? Like just like the ETF had that top and then it went on to make a higher high. Notice that CCJ did not, and I'll get rid of these not to confuse. Again, these are smaller cycles. It's helpful to see those smaller rallies, but notice we did not go on to make a higher high the way the broader ETF did. We just went on to make a lower lows. So this thing is going to be under pressure. I mean, even today, look at this. We're getting a daily cycle bounce, potentially. I mean, maybe this thing can't make a daily cycle low while the rest of the space does. But we're red, right? We opened here, right? Just understanding this candle, right? We gapped up, and then we came down and filled the gap and then some. We came all the way down here. Now we're trying to bounce again. But so CCJ is definitely pulling things down. That's important to know. Let's look at the weekly chart. We know that there's this bear flag that was spilling over. If this is a weekly cycle low, is it also possible if this is a daily cycle low, which it looks like it is it possible this is also a weekly cycle low? Let's think about where this puts us in our timing band. So we have the top on week 10, and this is a new low on week 25. So it's possible. What you have to, I guess my point though is whether it's a weekly cycle low or not really is irrelevant, because if it is a weekly cycle low, then I would expect we get a little feeble bounce maybe to like up here, and then we go on to make those lower lows, right? So whether these lower lows are part of this existing cycle that's just going longer, or it's a new cycle that tops out early, I mean, doesn't really matter for practical purposes. The point is you'll lose money if it's in a downtrend. And again, CCJ definitely would not be the horse that you ride in the uranium space. Clearly here, it's not doing well, but it gives you a good kind of sense. We'll probably expect this for most names. And again, monthly is pretty red, lower low. We just talked about that. Let's look at UUU next. How's UUU looking? So UUU is actually on day 3 of a new daily cycle. So we bottomed out here, right? And so these are going to be very similar, but not the same. So this thing rallied for 34 days. And then, so wow, that was a really long cycle at 58 days. But again, there are smaller cycles within. Like this is a cycle, that's a cycle. Like you can see from this swing high, low to this swing high to this swing low to this swing high to this swing low. But again, same pattern. We gave back the whole rally, and now we're trying to push higher again on day 3, and we're going to see when does this thing top out, and more importantly, is it going to give back whatever rally it puts in here. And on the weekly chart, same question, right? Like, is this our weekly cycle low? Do we have a few more weeks to go? Again, it's clear we still have a downtrend on the weekly chart. We would need to really get above this weekly candle, this big bearish monster at 683. So you can think of that as like your stretch goal in terms of upside for the daily cycle as well, like 683. What would that equivalent number be for CCJ? So for CCJ, that's 2391. For URNM, which is, that would be, wow, $33. For URA, that would be $21. These are aspirational goals. What I would say is I'd be surprised if we rallied beyond these numbers. And if we were to rally up to those numbers, that would actually be a little bit surprising. All that to say, it gives you a sense of where you might put a price target, right? Like those numbers are optimistic. DNN. So DNN is actually pretty interesting. Looks like this thing bottomed back in on December 6th. Well, that's interesting. This thing is really kind of bucking the trend, right? So that means this is actually day 11. So that's important because we've already made a high on day, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Is that day 5? Yeah. So we've already made a high on day 5. So that's important, like right here. And so what that means is, like the bearish scenario, we may already have our daily cycle top, right? Like that would obviously be really unfortunate. But the flip side to that is we have a very clear goal that we need to rally towards, right? So call it $1.21. We're here at $1.16, so it's another like 5% of upside. And if we think about what was the last cycle, pretty long. So 50 days. So it doesn't mean this cycle has to be 50 days, but like let's say it's somewhere in like the 30 to 35 day range, like we've seen for some of the other names. That would give you a low somewhere around the end of January. So you can think of that for all the names, somewhere around the end of January. And again, what we're more interested in is when it tops out, because once we know when it tops out, we'll have a better sense of how long of a decline we can kind of expect, which will be important to know about. And on the weekly chart for DNN, man, just this crazy consolidation, which we talked about on the monthly, which, I mean, this is just your weekly version. This is all going to resolve at some point in one direction or the other, right? It's really like, is it going to do that or is it going to do that, right? I suspect it's going to be option number 2, personally. So UEC, that is Uranium Energy Corp. So this one is looking nice. This is actually making a weekly swing low. That's important to take note of. UEC. So UEC, we know that we have a daily cycle low here for these names. It's really a question of, is this daily cycle low also a weekly cycle low? So the answer for UEC is maybe, right? It's still too early to tell, but this is pretty promising, right? And so this is actually day 3 of a new daily cycle. I mean, look at this. We've already rallied quite a bit. Now, there's always a bullish, like there's always like, okay, what's the bullish way to look at this? What's the bearish way, right? The bearish interpretation is, oh, well, the rally is already over, right? We've rallied 21%, right? And you can see, let's just look at what some of these other rallies were like before swing high. So that was a rally of 29% before swing high. That was a rally of 27% before swing high. That was a rally of 40% before swing high. That was a rally of 58%. So it just kind of gives you just a ballpark, right? So just 50%. So we've already rallied quite a bit, 21%. This is a really strong push out of the daily cycle, but it's not like it's crazy in historical terms. And again, this idea that you might actually be making a weekly cycle low, because it's possible that one name is able to kind of shine above the rest. And on the monthly chart, we are still red. But the important thing to note is the opening price. Always know the opening price. The opening price on the candle for the monthly is 388. So if we can get above 388, we go red on the month. Well, excuse me, green on the month, which is incredibly important. And look at this lower wick it's leaving behind. So this is a standout. UEC, Uranium Energy Corp, coming out of this low. Very interesting. Very interesting. Again, potential. Well, let's see. What do the weekly cycles look like for this name? So that's clearly a weekly cycle low. Like, yeah, that looks like it's one, right? Well, actually, you could say, right, it's like that's our low, right? And then, so that's 22 weeks. And then we start a new weekly cycle that tops out here on week 9. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That would be exactly, and there's no reason cycles need to be, exactly the same length by any means, but that's interesting. That would be exactly a 23-week cycle for in both cases. In this case, topped out on month 11, or excuse me, week 11, and that was a monster of a rally. And in this case, we topped out on week, what is that? 465, was that our top? Yep, 465, week 8. So it doesn't mean we're going to get a repeat performance. That's not how you think about this. This is more of the way to think about this is to give you a sense of what has happened in the past. Doesn't mean it's what will happen now, but it gives you a range of possibilities, right? So that you know, okay, it wouldn't be crazy for this thing to have an 8-week rally because it's done that before. In fact, it's had a 12-week rally, and this rally was even longer. Let's just for the sake of argument. So that was a longer cycle at 27 weeks. And the top came on week 16. Again, doesn't mean, oh, well, okay, now we're going to rally for 16 weeks. It tells you, okay, now we're looking at a range of possibilities here, right? Looking at the last 3 cycles, it tells you we're only on week 1, right? So this rally could have a little bit of legs. I would see anything below 460 is still potentially bearish. That's this line here. You can kind of see it very clearly, right? Like this has just been a big consolidation box inside this range here, right? And we poked below it to make your weekly cycle low. And now you would think that we're going to at least test the upper end of it, the upper end of the range. That's another $1 of upside, more or less, on the $3.70 stock. That's actually pretty nice upside. Okay, so yeah, so that's UEC. I just paused there. I think I'm going to take a trade on this thing myself. Very interesting here. So that's weekly. So that's your weekly, and we talked about again the monthly. So or did we? No, I think that was that might have been a different issue. So this thing opened at 388. So getting back above 388 would turn us green for the month. And that's still well inside this range. So that tells me the other thing to keep in mind is that this is a potential bullish outside monthly candle in the making. Now, because it is so late in the month, we only have a few trading days left. It's very possible that we don't finish the pattern this month. We don't finish it in December, which is fine because that's an important concept to just think about in general. The idea of a compound candle. So the pattern doesn't complete within the same candle, but it completes in the next candle, right? So you imagine, your January candle, and it doesn't mean the candle has to close this way either, right? It's just a question of almost like finishing the job. Like you could see a world where your January candle is something like that, right? And then if you combine your January candle, like this is your January candle and this is your December candle, if you combine them, they would be a bullish outside candle of both of these, right? Because they would go above the range of the combined range of these two candles, right? Which are really just inside these two candles, which are inside these two candles. This is all a big consolidation box, and we don't even need to trade for a breakout of the box. It's really just a trade back to the top of it, and you can make plenty of money here. So that's really interesting, UEC. And let's look at what does the quarterly chart look like. So the quarterly is actually green already. So that's interesting. So what the quarterly is setting us up for is an inside quarterly candle next month, right? So that the Q1 2023 candle starts as an inside candle, right? And then it's a question of, is it going to be able to make a new high on the quarterly chart? And that tells you, maybe we have a major bottom here, like in this neighborhood. Actually, in this case, right, that's interesting, right? Like this consolidation didn't even make a lower low below this Q1 candle, which is actually really bullish. So UEC is a big standout in the uranium space. Let's look at Yellow Cake. So Yellow Cake still pretty red on the month. Again, this one's similar story. Not to belabor the point here, but we do have what appears to be a daily cycle low. In this case, today would be literally day one. And this is how you get in on a trade early, right? You set your stops, obviously, whatever. But this gapped up, has come down to fill the gap and has now gone back the other way. That's really interesting. This is a delayed feed, to be fair, though, because this is trading on the London Stock Exchange. And you can see the weekly candle is turning green. Again, you have the possibility here that this is also a weekly cycle low here. In this case, will be on week 26. The cycle before that was, what is that? Call it 17 weeks, which makes sense. That was around how long the NASDAQ cycle was. And the one before that was 27 weeks. So about the same neighborhood. So interesting. And again, this is week one. You're going to have something like a 20-week cycle. That's a lot of potential. It's a lot of price action to work with, right? It's going to be a question of how long is the rally for that whole weekly cycle. Let's look at Elevate Uranium. This one was looking strong for a time, and now things have really taken a turn. My God. So, I mean, look how it was nice and green in in November, but we're now pretty solidly red. And look at what just happened. We just made a new low. So this one is like, I'm sure there's some kind of fundamental news. This one is like plunging. I mean, my God, look at this daily chart. It's just like look at the slope of that. My God. Like just barely any tiny little rallies get snuffed out. So on your weekly chart, this is most certainly not a weekly cycle low yet. I mean, the week could turn out, we can get a reversal in the next couple days, I suppose. But this thing looks like it's seeking out some dramatic new lows on week 26. Yikes. That one is one to stay away from. Elevate Uranium. Oh, and excuse me. This is actually the quarterly chart. Oh my God. Yikes. So we're getting a quarterly swing high in the making here on Elevate Uranium. So just as UEC was your standout to the upside, Elevate is one of your standouts to the downside. Yikes. So that's your quarterly chart. How does the monthly look? How does the monthly look inside that? I'm assuming it's a big red candle. Yep. So, right, this is you look in the textbook, you could find this for downtrend, right? We did this, did that. Now we did this, right? So if it's a real downtrend, we're going to keep going lower because we're going to make a lower low below that, and then we're going to bounce, and then we're going to keep going is what we would expect, right? Now, the possibility still lies. The possibility still exists that like this becomes some kind of epic double bottom. Excuse me. I mean, but we would need a massive reversal Thursday, Friday, or early next week or something to make that happen. This looks like capitulation selling to me, which at some point is going to end. But we've just only now taken out this pivot, and you can see this line is drawn here for a reason. This is a clear cluster of pivots that we're seeking out. That it seemed like we were seeking out already as part of this downtrend, and so that would be a logical place to find yourself, and that would lead you down to the 18 area. So first to stop at 28. I mean, these are huge moves because we're talking about a 35-cent stock. So that is dangerous. Yikes. UROY, this one was doing well. This one is on day 2 of a daily cycle, and it is a 30-day daily cycle. We had added some numbers to this, and we had talked about how this thing could get all the way down to like, the low 2s, and that's exactly what we did. Luckily, we're bouncing now, so that's good. We're going to have to see again, not to belabor the point, but not to sound like a broken record, but like everything else, we're going to have to see how long this thing can bounce. What it has going for it is this is a higher low, right? This is a higher low than this one. Excuse me. And so that is positive. But we really need to get it back above 278 to get the party started. So you can almost think of that as for a short-term trade. That's kind of your cap to the upside. And yeah, you can, and the 10-week moving average is not too far above. NextGen, this one was performing well for some time. We have a daily cycle low here. This is day 2. So same kind of theme, very early in a new daily cycle. And in this case, very possible. So this is this is again to that point of outperforming. Look how much higher this is versus its previous low versus these other ones, right? So this kind of double bottom consolidation kind of situation led to this little rally, which still can't break out. Still hasn't been able to break out above like this kind of area here. And so we're going to make another run at that. You know, the 470 area. We're down here at 421. So I think of that as your potential upside cap. Now, I say upside cap. Let's see how price reacts when it gets there. Maybe it blasts through that, and that would be awesome. But that could be your kind of limit to the upside on that name, and that's NextGen. Let's look at Paladin, and we'll look at Fission last. So Paladin is actually just made a new low today. This is delayed, so that's important. I'm here in the U.S. This trades in the Australia exchange, so it's making a new low today. That's not super auspicious. And in terms of the weekly cycle, last weekly cycle low was clearly about 26 weeks ago. So they're all in a similar spot in terms of timing, but it doesn't mean they'll all bottom exactly at the same time. So this is definitely not looking as great relative to its peers. Fission, this one was outperforming. We talked about how this massive monthly candle could provide some cover. And so far, we are still just an inside month, right? We're just plainly inside. And this is turning into a doji candle, which is good, obviously. And on the weekly, right, you've got like this clear low here. Boom. And then what was the rally that ensued? We made another low here around week 17. So this looks to me like, you know, this was a short little cycle, and then this is starting a new one. And so this is almost like a little pit stop, and we need to go back and test the $74 area. This is looking promising, right? What does it look like on the daily chart? Right, so on the daily chart, we're like way up here, whereas most things are like down there making a weekly cycle low. Yet this is a daily cycle low. This is a swing low. It's just happening so much higher than down here, which is bullish. That's a good thing. And so again, that's that area, that 74 that we talked about. Looks like we're definitely going to try to make a test of that. And then considering this is probably a new daily cycle, or at the very least, the quote unquote half cycle low, it should have enough energy to at least kind of test this peak. Then we're going to have to see, kind of revisit, see how price reacts. The last one we'll do is Fission 3.0. That had some great fundamental news, and yeah, this is a good study in price action. So you can kind of think of this as our daily cycle low, right? And again, nothing mystical about it. We're just following the patterns. This is obviously thinly traded, so you can see looks a little wild. But we rallied, right? And obviously we had huge fundamental news here. Like, look at that big boom. That's where we made our daily cycle high. And that, if nothing else, cycles are helpful in helping you to just kind of anticipate, oh, wow, we've been rallying for X number of days. Is it possible that we're getting close to the daily cycle high, which means we're going to decline into a daily cycle low? And a daily cycle low doesn't have to be the end of the world, but it just tells you control risk. This is probably not like when we were doing this thing for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. That was probably not the time to enter, right? You have to imagine we're moving into the daily cycle high, and that's exactly what happened. You can see this big, that's right, it's a bearish outside candle, just like wiped out all these days of gains, right? So anyone that entered in here, any trade that happened in here got wiped out on this one day. And then it bear flagged for a little bit. Now it looks like we're maybe making a daily cycle low with the rest of the market. But it's entirely possible that this is just going to be another lower high and this will spill over. We'll have to see. But this decline, what was the decline percentage-wise? Yeah, 26% decline. That's healthy, right? Like, after this huge run-up, declining by 26% to put in a short-term low, a higher low, higher than this low, way higher than that one, obviously, that's really bullish. So if there's a name to own, this would definitely be one of them. Let's see, what's the market cap on this bad boy? 80 million. So that's pretty promising too. It's not huge. I mean, obviously we don't know what revenues are. And finally, let's look at the weekly. So just to recap, just writing this down, UEC and FUU. So looking at the weekly, that daily cycle low appeared to be a weekly cycle low as well. That's great news. So we had these 2 weeks of like basically nothingness. and then a bunch of money flooded into this thing, right? Like took it from 8 cents to 22 cents, right? And we're up here around 26 cents. And after these 3 weeks of up, like again, this is just a mirror of the chart on the daily. It's just obviously more just consolidated. That big bearish outside weekly candle, or excuse me, daily candle, that turned into a weekly outside candle, right? But that's okay because it's only, what is that, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that was on week 6. And so we're right now on week 7. That's not like super early in a weekly cycle, but it's also not really late. So there's no reason, and I'll turn the auto off because this candle is so big that we're gonna have to like. It's early enough in the cycle that there's no reason why we wouldn't expect to go on and make higher highs above this, right? Like there's like we probably end up, and especially if you think about the idea that the rest of the U space maybe also made a weekly cycle low. You could see the world where this thing rallies, right? Like this is the week 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Like easily. And this isn't a prediction by any means. This is a scenario, right? Like this is something that it wouldn't be crazy. And that's the good way to kind of think about it, right? That like, how long have we been rallying on the daily level? How long have we been rallying on a weekly level? Where does that potentially put us in these cycles, right? And maybe that becomes your top. That's a time to kind of lighten the load, something like that. And I'm not saying it's going to 63 cents. This is just for illustrative purposes. Like we wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. And in fact, this is my expectation. And clearly, right, like you don't want to be long somewhere below there, right? Not saying you would put your stop specifically exactly at 25 cents, but that gives you a ballpark, right? That like, yeah, right about there, you probably, if you're really aggressive, maybe you give it even more room. I mean, that's a huge decline, 8 cents off of 28 cents, obviously. But if you're trying to catch something like this, I'd say position size accordingly, give it some space and kind of see what happens from there. But it's a really small name at an $80 million market cap. So also, there's reason to be cautious there. Again, position sizing is a superpower. So that's the weekly, and then the monthly, right? This monthly, I mean, look at this huge monthly candle that takes out all these years of decline. Now this candle is consolidating. We probably end up, yeah. So you could see a world where we don't do too much the next week or two, right? So maybe it's actually a little bit more consolidation before a bigger explosive move in January, right? Like something like that. And that's where you get that explosive move on the weekly front. So that's Fission 3.0. And we'll kind of leave it at that. And you can see this will be going back to kind of take out these previous highs here, right? And so we'll kind of leave it at that for our uranium update. So again, UEC, Fission Uranium looking pretty good. NextGen not looking too bad. I'd say UEC, or excuse me, Elevate, probably some kind of fundamental thing happening there. Probably looking like one of the worst of the bunch. And CCJ also just kind of dragging things down as well. So that's how it stands for uranium. I do think we're still in the 3-year cycle decline. So I wouldn't get too excited about longer term prospects. But this is more about kind of short term. What does the next few weeks look like? Even if we are probably going for a more substantial low in mid to late Q1 2023. So that's the uranium update. Thank you for watching.